when 38-year-old Karrueche Tran was seen crying beside 58-year-old Deion Sanders in a hospital room, the internet immediately decided it was watching the beginning of a beautiful love story. The images looked emotional. Karrueche was beside his hospital bed, holding his hand and visibly worried about him. It seemed like the kind of moment that needed no explanation. But the deeper people looked, the more complicated the story became. Suddenly, questions started appearing everywhere. Why was Karrueche there? How close were she and Deion really? And why did her presence feel so surprising when neither of them had publicly announced a relationship at the time? What looked like a simple emotional moment quickly turned into one of the most talked-about celebrity relationship stories. The hospital footage came from a behind-the-scenes documentary about Deion Sanders' battle with bladder cancer, shared by his eldest son. Deion Sanders Jr. Deion had already been through an incredibly difficult period. Serious blood clots in his left leg had led to multiple surgeries, and doctors eventually had to amputate 2 of his toes to protect the rest of his leg. Then came another devastating diagnosis: bladder cancer. He had no choice but to undergo major surgery, followed by a long and painful recovery. For years, fans had known Deion as the confident athlete, coach, and larger-than-life personality who always seemed to be in control. Whether he was making incredible plays during his NFL career or standing on the sidelines leading his players, he rarely showed vulnerability. But now, cameras were showing something completely different. They were showing a tired and emotional Deion Sanders fighting for his health. And sitting beside him was Karrueche Tran. That was the moment everything changed. People began replaying the footage, zooming into details, and trying to understand what was happening behind the scenes. After all, most people don't sit beside someone's hospital bed, hold their hand, and cry unless there is some kind of deep emotional connection. But was the internet seeing a genuine relationship unfold, or was everyone reading too much into one emotional moment? At first, people expected the rumors to disappear after Deion recovered from surgery. Instead, the opposite happened. The hospital footage only made people more curious. Deion was 58 years old, a grandfather, a father of 5, and someone who had already experienced many of life's biggest milestones. Karrueche was 38, had never been married, had no children, and had spent years building a successful career of her own. The nearly 20-year age difference was one thing. But what really caught people's attention was the difference in where they appeared to be in life. Deion had already raised his children and watched them become adults. He had become a grandfather and built an enormous career in sports. After everything he had recently endured with his health, his priorities appeared to revolve around his family, his own well-being, and the football program he had worked so hard to build. Karrueche seemed to be entering a very different chapter. After years of rebuilding her career following a highly publicized breakup, she had finally created stability for herself. She continued acting, built business ventures, and eventually won a Daytime Emmy Award. More importantly, she had worked hard to establish an identity that wasn't simply connected to whoever she happened to be dating. So naturally, people started asking a difficult question. What exactly did these two people, living such different lives, see in each other? But then another name entered the conversation, and suddenly the story became even more complicated. Tracey Edmonds. You can't really discuss Deion Sanders' recent relationship history without mentioning Tracey. The two spent more than 12 years together. She was there through major career changes, business ventures, family milestones, and earlier health struggles. For years, many people assumed marriage would eventually be the next step. But it never happened. Their relationship quietly ended in 2025. And only months later, Karrueche was appearing beside Deion during one of the most vulnerable periods of his life. That timing immediately caught people's attention. There was another detail that made things even more interesting. Tracey and Karrueche already knew each other. They had moved through some of the same Hollywood circles, and Tracey had even publicly supported Karrueche's acting career. Then television personality Claudia Jordan made a claim on her podcast that sent the rumors into overdrive. According to Claudia, Tracey had allegedly asked Karrueche directly whether anything romantic was happening between her and Deion before the rumors became public. According to that account, Karrueche said there was nothing romantic happening and insisted that she and Deion were simply friends. But there is an important distinction here. That conversation has never been publicly confirmed by either woman. Still, once the story reached social media, it spread quickly. The discussion wasn't even about the hospital anymore. People were now comparing timelines, looking back at Deion's previous relationship, and asking whether the signs had been there long before anyone noticed. Had Deion and Karrueche already been getting closer while everyone else was looking somewhere else? Some people even began calling Karrueche a homewrecker, although the criticism wasn't necessarily based on claims of cheating. Instead, many were talking about something commonly described as girl code. The idea is simple: certain people are considered off-limits because of their relationship with someone you know. And because Tracy had publicly supported Karrueche in the past, some fans believed a line had been crossed. But just when people thought they understood the story, something else happened. By the beginning of 2026, Deion and Karrueche were being seen together more openly. They were reportedly vacationing together, appearing in family vlogs, and spending more time in public. At that point, there was much less room for speculation. The relationship appeared to be real. The hospital video may have started the rumors, but these later appearances made people even more convinced that Deion and Karrueche were actually together. And once people accepted that, the conversation changed again. Now fans weren't simply asking whether they were a couple. They were asking whether they were compatible. Every family vlog became something to analyze. Every public appearance became a clue. Every joke and casual interaction suddenly seemed important. One particular moment became especially controversial. It happened during a family vlog filmed after Deion's surgery. Deion was surrounded by family members, reflecting on everything he had experienced during his recovery. The atmosphere appeared relaxed, and everyone seemed comfortable enough to joke around. At one point, Karrueche talked about wanting them to enjoy life now that the hardest part was behind them. She spoke about traveling, making memories, seeing new places, and appreciating the time they had together. It sounded heartfelt. She seemed grateful that Deion had made it through such a difficult chapter and could finally begin living life again. Then Deion smiled and jokingly said she was looking forward to enjoying the fruits. Everyone laughed. Karrueche laughed too. But she quickly explained that she wasn't talking about money or material things. She meant that she wanted them to enjoy life, travel, and make memories together. Inside the room, it may have been nothing more than a playful moment between two people who were comfortable around each other. But online, people saw something very different. Some viewers dismissed it as harmless teasing. Couples joke with each other all the time. Others weren't so quick to let it go. They wondered why a heartfelt conversation about enjoying life suddenly turned into a joke about money and material things. And they noticed how quickly Karrueche felt the need to explain herself. That detail became especially interesting because of everything she had worked to overcome in her past. After her highly publicized relationship with Chris Brown ended, Karrueche spent years rebuilding her image and career. She focused on acting, business, and creating an identity that stood on its own. She eventually won a Daytime Emmy and continued developing her career independently. So when she immediately clarified that she wasn't interested in Deion's money, some viewers felt uncomfortable watching the moment. To them, it looked like she was defending a reputation she had already spent years trying to protect. And that wasn't the only thing people noticed. Fans also pointed to playful social media exchanges, comments Deion left under her posts, and moments from family outings where he teased her in front of the camera. Individually, none of these things necessarily meant anything. But when people already believe there is a problem, every little detail starts looking like evidence. Some viewers saw two people who genuinely enjoyed being together. Others felt Karrueche sometimes seemed to be reacting to Deion's personality rather than expressing her own. Of course, nobody watching from the outside knows what happens when the cameras disappear. A few minutes from a family vlog cannot reveal an entire relationship. But once people start searching for red flags, even innocent moments can become suspicious. And eventually, the question became much bigger than whether Deion and Karrueche were actually together. People started asking what it would really mean for Karrueche to build a life with Deion Sanders. Because dating Deion isn't simply dating a famous man. It means entering a world that already exists. A world built around football, family, business, travel, responsibilities, and constant public attention. Deion's life has been shaped over decades. By the time Karrueche entered it, he wasn't simply a retired football legend. He had become the face of a major college football program. His life involved recruiting players, coaching, traveling across the country, attending events, managing business ventures, and spending time with his children and grandchildren. And much of that life happens in front of cameras. Interviews, documentaries, family vlogs, social media, public appearances. His world is almost always visible. Anyone who becomes part of that world isn't simply entering a relationship. They're entering a lifestyle that already has its own rhythm. And that's one reason people keep bringing up Tracey Edmonds. For more than 12 years, Tracey had already learned how to exist within that world. She supported Deion through major career changes and became part of the family life that audiences saw from the outside. For a long time, it looked as though they were building a future together. Then, after more than a decade, they went their separate ways without ever getting married. That history naturally made people wonder whether Karrueche could eventually face some of the same challenges. But there is another major difference. Karrueche already had a successful life before Deion. Her career was largely connected to Los Angeles, where she had spent years acting, attending fashion events, and developing business opportunities. Deion's professional world, meanwhile, was centered around Colorado and his football career. That means distance alone could become a challenge. Two people can love each other deeply and still struggle when their careers demand different schedules, different locations, and different priorities. Of course, that doesn't mean the relationship can't work. Many couples manage long-distance careers. Many celebrity couples support each other's ambitions while maintaining their own identities. But it requires compromise. And sometimes, one person ends up making more sacrifices than the other. That is why the conversation eventually moved away from whether Deion and Karrueche were dating. People started asking whether they were actually building the same future. Because love can bring two people together. But eventually, they have to decide where that relationship is going. And this is where one of the biggest questions surrounding Deion and Karrueche appears. Children. Deion has openly discussed having a vasectomy and not wanting to become a father again. He has explained that he has already experienced raising children and doesn't see himself starting over later in life. Whatever anyone thinks about that decision, one thing is clear: according to the source material, Deion has been consistent about it. Karrueche, meanwhile, has spoken in past interviews about wanting to become a mother someday. Of course, people change. What someone wanted years ago may not be what they want today. And nobody outside the relationship can know exactly how Karrueche feels about motherhood right now. But if becoming a mother is still important to her, then there is a very serious question sitting underneath this entire relationship. What happens when two people genuinely care about each other but want different futures? Some differences can be solved. A couple can move to another city. They can adjust schedules. They can support each other's careers. But having children is different. There isn't really a perfect compromise. Eventually, both people have to decide whether they want the same thing, because if they don't, one person could eventually have to sacrifice something that matters enormously to them. And that brings people right back to Tracey Edmonds. She spent more than a decade beside Deion and supported him through some of the biggest moments of his career. Their relationship lasted years, yet marriage never happened. Now, people wonder whether history could repeat itself. But the truth is that every relationship is different. The past doesn't automatically determine the future. Maybe Deion and Karrueche have already figured out how to navigate the differences between them. Maybe they don't see those differences as problems at all. And maybe the internet is simply trying to predict the ending of a story that hasn't been written yet. There is also another possibility. After everything Karrueche experienced in her previous relationship, perhaps she has finally found the peace and stability she wanted. Perhaps being with Deion gives her something she values more than the things outsiders think she should want. And perhaps Deion, after everything he has experienced with his health, career, family, and previous relationships, simply wants to enjoy the present. From the family vlogs and public moments that have been seen, they appear happy together. Whether that happiness lasts for years or whether life eventually takes them in different directions is something nobody can know yet. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire story. The internet has spent months analyzing hospital footage, comparing timelines, discussing Tracey Edmonds, questioning Karrueche's intentions, examining jokes from family vlogs, and trying to identify every possible red flag. But at the end of the day, none of us are actually inside their relationship. We see clips. They live the reality. And sometimes the biggest mistake people make is assuming that a few minutes of someone's life tells us everything about the other 23 hours. So perhaps the real story isn't whether Deion Sanders and Karrueche Tran are perfect for each other. Maybe it's a much bigger question that every relationship eventually has to answer. When you fall in love with someone, are you truly building a future together? Or are you simply stepping into a future that one person already created before you arrived? Only Deion and Karrueche know the answer. And for now, they seem to be choosing to live the story rather than explain it to everyone watching. The internet can speculate. Fans can debate. Critics can point out red flags. But eventually, time will reveal whether this was simply an unexpected chapter in both of their lives, or the beginning of something that lasts much longer than anyone expected. Whether that happiness lasts for years or whether life eventually takes them in different directions is something nobody can know yet. And maybe that's the most important part of this entire story. The internet has spent months analyzing hospital footage, comparing timelines, discussing Tracy Edmonds, questioning Karrueche's intentions, examining jokes from family vlogs, and trying to identify every possible red flag. But at the end of the day, none of us are actually inside their relationship. We see clips. They live the reality. And sometimes the biggest mistake people make is assuming that a few minutes of someone's life tells us everything about the other 23 hours. So perhaps the real story isn't whether Deion Sanders and Karrueche Tran are perfect for each other. Maybe it's a much bigger question that every relationship eventually has to answer. When you fall in love with someone, are you truly building a future together? Or are you simply stepping into a future that one person already created before you arrived? Only Deion and Karrueche know the answer. And for now, they seem to be choosing to live the story rather than explain it to everyone watching. The internet can speculate. Fans can debate. Critics can point out red flags. But eventually, time will reveal whether this was simply an unexpected chapter in both of their lives, or the beginning of something that lasts much longer than anyone expected.